My true story from Tennessee. I came to the wedding, but my daughter said, "I'm sorry you weren't invited, go away." But I was the one who paid for the venue, so I turned off the lights. They thought I was a decoration. I reminded them who built the stage. I never expected that the first words my daughter said to me on the day of her wedding could break my heart like that. "Mom, you do not belong at a European-style wedding. You look like an old maid from the countryside. I do not want anyone seeing you. You don't belong here. This is a curated event, a luxury wedding. You showing up in a Walmart dress with those tacky red flowers makes me look like I came from a trailer park. Leave before I have security throw you out." She did not greet me. She did not look at the bouquet of red roses I was holding out to her. She did not even glance at the envelope in my other hand, the invitation she herself had sent. At least I had thought so. I stood there, stunned, at the edge of the grand white archway leading into the courtyard. Guests were arriving in pairs, dressed in beige and blush, hair curled, shoes polished. A string quartet played under a silk-draped canopy, and I was a wrinkle in the picture, a problem she wanted gone before the first camera shutter clicked. The invitation I had received was elegant. Heavy cardstock, gold lettering, no return address. It had her name on it, the date, and a printed quote, "Love is composed of a single soul inhabiting two bodies," but there was no location. I thought it might have been an oversight. I tried to call her that night. No answer. I called again in the morning. Left a message. Nothing. I texted, just asking for the address. My message was read and left without a reply. I even emailed the wedding planner's domain I found on a corner of the envelope. No answer there either. I waited, foolishly hoping the silence was just stress. I bought a dress, a pale lavender one, long sleeves to cover my hands. I made sure to dye my hair, soft brown like it used to be when she was little, and would comb it as we watched TV. And I picked out roses, deep, velvety red ones, from the flower shop where I used to get her birthday bouquets every year until she said flowers made her sad. The morning of the wedding, I searched online, using the planner's business name, cross-referenced their upcoming events, and narrowed it down to one location, the Whiteside Country Club, just outside of Nashville. I drove 2 hours, my hands clenched around the wheel the entire way. When I arrived, I could hear the faint music and laughter before I saw the venue. I passed under a white balloon archway, walked toward the entrance, holding the roses gently, like something sacred. Then I saw the security guard, a tall man in a navy suit and earpiece. He stepped in front of me and raised one hand. "Name?" he asked. "Mariana Rowan. I'm the bride's mother." He looked down at the clipboard in his hand, flipped a few pages. "I'm sorry, ma'am, you're not listed here." "There must be some mistake," I said. "This is Emma Rowan's wedding, correct?" "Yes, ma'am. I received an invitation. I understand, but your name is not on the guest list. I'm her mother." He didn't look cruel, just blank, professional. That was almost worse. "Please," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I just want to give her these." I held out the roses. That was when I heard the heels on the pavement. Emma appeared, flanked by 2 bridesmaids in blush pink, her veil flowing like smoke behind her. She didn't look at the roses. She looked at me like I was a broken chair someone had forgotten to throw away. "Mom?" she said loudly. "I told you not to come." "You didn't," I said quietly. "You sent me an invitation." "I sent you a courtesy. It wasn't an invitation to show up. I just wanted to be here. I paid for the venue, Emma." "And that's all you needed to do," she snapped. "You wrote the check." "Thank you, but you are not part of this event." She turned slightly, addressing the guard now, as if I weren't standing 3 feet from her. "She is not a guest. She needs to be removed." I blinked. "Emma, I'm not doing this. Not today." Her voice was sharp now, almost shaking. "You don't belong here. This is a curated event, a luxury wedding. You showing up in a Walmart dress with those tacky red flowers makes me look like I came from a trailer park. People were watching. I could feel them, their eyes, their murmurs." A photographer raised her lens, paused. I saw a bridesmaid whisper to another. "Please," I whispered, "just take the flowers. I'll leave." Emma stepped closer and leaned in so only I could hear her. "You want to be useful? Go clean the kitchen. That's what you're good at. You were never meant to be seen." My hand let go without meaning to. The bouquet fell. The stems hit the concrete, and one of the blooms rolled into the gutter. The guard's hand was on my elbow now, gentle but firm. "I'm going," I whispered. But no one heard. As I walked away, I did not look back. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't risk them seeing the way I was unraveling. I had spent 25 years raising her, and in 1 minute, she had taught me who I truly was in her story. An extra, a shadow, a mistake, to be hidden before the first guest raised their champagne glass. And yet I had paid for the stage she stood on. But that would not be the last thing I paid for, not by a long shot. When I held her for the first time, I was 22, broke and alone. Her father had already left by then, said he needed to find himself, as if fatherhood had arrived like a sudden storm he could not weather. I never heard from him again, not even a postcard. It was just me and Emma. She came into the world red-faced and screaming, but calmed the moment I whispered to her. I remember thinking, maybe this is what love is supposed to feel like. And from that day on, she was my entire reason for getting up in the morning, even when mornings came too early and sleep came too late. I worked 3 jobs at once, day shifts at the diner, folding laundry at the motel on weekends, and doing hair in the back room of my cousin's trailer on nights when I could still stand. We rented a tiny 1-bedroom apartment, and Emma had the bedroom. I slept on the couch. We shared a bathroom with a leak under the sink and roaches that refused to be evicted, but we survived. She was always smart, brilliant really. She read early, memorized poems by 6, and could talk circles around adults by 9. Her teachers said she was Ivy League material. I used to whisper to her while braiding her hair before school, "Someday, baby girl, you're going to go places Mama never could." She did. She earned a scholarship to a private high school out of district. I packed lunches in brown paper bags and took on more shifts to cover books and uniforms. When she got into Vanderbilt, I cried so hard in the parking lot of the diner, they sent me home early. I framed her acceptance letter. When she graduated magna cum laude and landed a job in a PR firm in Nashville, I bragged to everyone who would listen. "My Emma," I'd say, writes speeches for mayors and CEOs. But somewhere along the way, she stopped mentioning me. At first, I thought it was an oversight. Then it became a pattern. In every article, every interview, every conference panel, she told the same story. Raised by a single parent who worked just enough to get by, whose absence made her independent. I became a cautionary tale, a shadow, a footnote that grew fainter with every retelling. She never invited me to her company events. When I asked to visit her office once, she said she was too busy that day. When her photo appeared in Nashville Monthly's Women to Watch, I flipped through the article, expecting a nod, a line, even just a word. Nothing. She spoke of mentors, professors, women in the industry, not of me. Not of late-night fevers or math homework or the 2 winters we went without heat so she could have braces. Still, I never said anything. Maybe part of me understood. She wanted to reinvent herself. She wanted to reinvent herself. Maybe she needed to shed the grit of her upbringing to step into rooms I could not enter. But when she got engaged, and she called me crying with joy, I thought, maybe she remembers now. She said, "I want this day to be beautiful, Mom, like the weddings we used to watch on TV." I said, "Then we'll make it happen." She talked about the venue, white stone steps, an open-air courtyard, the flowers, orchids and wild roses, the dress, custom, imported from Spain, the guest list, over 200 names. She sounded like a little girl again, giddy and bright. She never once asked if I could afford to help, but I offered anyway. I took out a loan against the house I had paid off over 30 years, brick by brick, cleaning other people's homes while neglecting my own. I signed the dotted line without flinching, $50,000. That was the final cost of the venue and the production team she wanted. It would have been more, but I knew a woman at the bank who gave me a low interest rate because no one backs a bride like her mama. I sent the money in full. She called me crying. "You're the most generous woman I've ever known," she said. "I do not deserve you, Mom." I cried too. Not because of the money, but because it had been so long since she said anything kind to me. That call meant more to me than the house ever did. I started sewing her a sash, hand-stitched her name in cursive on soft ivory. I imagined pinning it on her before she walked down the aisle. I imagined a hug, a photo, a moment that would stitch us back together, but that moment never came. Instead, I stood at the entrance of her wedding, holding red roses and hope, only to be told I was unwanted. An embarrassment. A stain. She called me a Walmart embarrassment to my face. A distraction, a problem. And I, still aching from the memory of her calling me the most generous woman, was removed like a trespasser. The same lips that told me, "You are the person I'm most grateful for," now said, "You are ruining my day. Get out." It was then I realized gratitude, for some people, has an expiration date. Mine expired the moment I signed that check. But what she did not know was that I still had the receipt, not just for the money, but for everything. And I was not done being her mother. Not yet. I had sewn the dress myself, soft lavender cotton, long sleeves to cover the creases on my arms, hemmed carefully with the same machine I used to make Emma's school uniforms. I had stitched it quietly, at night, when the world was still, and I could imagine a day where I would wear it and be seen, not as a burden, not as a relic, but as a mother. When I stepped out of the car that morning, bouquet in hand, the sky was still forgiving. Clouds moved slow. The air was warm. For a moment I believed things might go differently. But as I stood at the edge of the venue, red roses trembling in my hands, that hope vanished. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step back," the security guard said again. He was trying to be polite, but there was a rehearsed firmness in his voice. "I'm her mother," I replied. "I just want to leave the flowers. Maybe take one photo, one moment, that's all." He hesitated, then looked over his shoulder, and that was when she returned, Emma. No veil this time, just her in her custom silk gown, fitted to perfection, every strand of her hair curled into place by a professional who likely charged more than I used to make in a week. She walked toward me like I was a stain she needed to scrub out before the guests arrived. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My throat was tight from the silence I'd carried all morning. She looked down at the bouquet in my hand, bright red roses against a pale blue ribbon, and then, as if I had summoned her cruelty by holding on to even an ounce of sentiment, she raised her voice. "Don't make a scene," she snapped. "Seriously, Mom, this is not the time for you to pretend you're part of this." "I just want to take a photo," I said. "Just one." Emma turned to look around at the arriving guests, at the photographers adjusting their lenses. Her voice rose just enough for the crowd to hear. "Do not do this. Do not embarrass yourself," she hissed. "You are being a clown right now. This is a wedding, not charity. You do not belong here." The words cracked through the air like thunder. A few heads turned. I felt eyes grazing my body like needles. I looked down at my dress, the one I made with shaking hands, and it suddenly felt ridiculous, homemade, pathetic. But I still clutched the bouquet. "I paid for the venue," I whispered. Emma let out a laugh, sharp, brittle. "And what? That means you get a front row seat? You think money buys you class? You're just a ghost in rags trying to haunt me on the one day I'm finally free." She turned to the guard. "Get her out of here." The man stepped forward, unsure, as if he'd just realized the situation was more than he'd signed up for. I didn't wait for him to touch me. I stepped back on my own, one foot, then another, until I was off the path, on the edge of the gravel, the hem of my dress brushing the weeds. I looked around. Not one person stepped forward. Not one face softened. The florist was arranging flowers on the archway nearby. She didn't look up. The caterer walked past me, eyes averted. The photographers adjusted their settings like nothing had happened. I bent down and placed the bouquet gently on a low wall near the entrance. I didn't want to carry it anymore. I didn't want to carry any of it anymore. And then I saw it. A server in white shirt and black vest walked by, glanced down at the flowers, and with the toe of his shoe nudged the bouquet to the side, out of the way, like you might a bag of trash someone left behind. The roses rolled. A few petals fell. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. The bouquet I had chosen with trembling hands was pushed aside like garbage by someone too young to know what it meant and too indifferent to ask. I turned away before the tears came, not because I was ashamed to cry, but because I had promised myself. No more tears for people who chose not to see me. I walked back to my car, alone, unphotographed, uninvited, unclaimed. But what they did not know, what none of them knew, was that I still had the contract. I still had my name on the dotted line. I still held something they had forgotten. And I had just decided I would not go quietly. I drove home in silence. No music, no news, just the hum of the highway and the echo of my daughter's voice clanging inside my skull like a rusted bell. You are being a clown right now. You do not belong here. I pulled into my driveway, parked the car, and sat behind the wheel for a long time. The sun was setting, the air had cooled, but my hands were still warm, pulsing with a slow, steady heat I had not felt in years. I walked into the house, slipped off my shoes, and went to the kitchen drawer, the one where I kept all the paperwork I did not want to lose. Among old insurance forms and utility bills, I found it. The contract, thick paper, heavy, legal. It had taken me 2 weeks to understand it the first time. The wedding planner had used words like disbursement and liability cap and auxiliary control clause, but I had read every word. I had signed every page, and there it was, Section 9.3, printed clean and clear. In the event that the primary financial sponsor is excluded from the event or its representation in any capacity, without prior consent, the sponsor reserves the right to initiate emergency program cessation for breach of good faith agreement. I stared at those words for a long moment, then reached for my phone. The number for the event coordinator was printed on the second page. I pressed call. He answered on the second ring, sounding winded. "Hello, this is Nathan with Bliss Point Events." "This is Mariana Rowan," I said. A pause. "Yes, ma'am?" "I'm calling regarding the Rowan-Hamilton wedding. Yes, everything's been going smoothly so far. Beautiful weather, great turnout. I need you to activate Clause 9.3. Another pause. I'm sorry? "You heard me. Clause 9.3. I was excluded. I was publicly removed by the bride despite being the sole sponsor listed. The exclusion was not communicated. There was no consent given. I am requesting immediate cessation." "Ma'am, do you understand what that means?" "I do." "Are you sure you want to proceed?" I looked out the window. The sky had turned a rich, angry purple. "Yes, I am sure." His voice dropped to a professional register. "Understood. I will notify technical staff immediately. Please remain available for verification if needed." I hung up. Then I waited. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the door as if someone might come bursting through it. But no one did. Instead, I imagined the scene. Emma standing at the altar, radiant in silk, preparing to give her vows. Guests perched in their seats, cameras trained on her. And then, darkness. Silence. Not a flicker, not a sound. Just confusion. Whispers. Panic. The realization that something, or someone, had pulled the plug. Because someone had. Me. At the exact moment my daughter stepped up to speak, every light in the venue shut off, the music stopped, the microphones died, the fairy tale froze mid-sentence, and I sat in my quiet kitchen, hands steady for the first time in days. They thought I had been erased, but the contract had remembered me. And now? So would they. At first, they thought it was a simple power outage, a blip in the system. A fuse, maybe. The kind of hiccup you expect when hosting a high-production wedding in an old southern estate with too many fairy lights and too few backup generators. Guests murmured. The string quartet stopped mid-song. The DJ tapped his laptop, looked around in confusion. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Still nothing. The chandeliers remained dark. The archway lights, once glowing like a fairy tale, flickered no more. The microphones stayed dead. The screens set to play the engagement slideshow held their blank stares. People shifted in their seats. A few stood up. A bridesmaid whispered something to the event planner, who darted off with a phone pressed to his ear. Someone near the front said, "Is this part of the program?" Another replied, "I think the system crashed." But then came the voice, a sharp, trembling voice from the altar steps. "Fix it!" Emma's voice cut through the courtyard. "This is my wedding. Get the lights back on." She turned on the planner. "Where is the tech team? Where is everyone?" The planner, flustered, shook his head. "We're contacting support. There's no system error. Everything was, deactivated? It was a manual override." And then the whispers started. In the second row, someone leaned toward their neighbor. "Did you hear what happened with her mom?" "What mom?" "She showed up, said she paid for the whole thing. Emma kicked her out." Someone else, closer to the back, spoke a little louder. "I think her mom pulled the plug." "That old woman?" "She looked heartbroken." I saw her with flowers. More heads turned, then a phone screen lit up. A guest had started live streaming from their seat, panning the darkened stage, the confused faces, the bride pacing in her white gown like a performer abandoned mid-scene. Within 20 minutes, the video had been shared on Facebook, then TikTok, then Twitter. It was titled, "When the Bride's Mom Turns Off the Wedding She Paid For." Over 2 million views within the first 24 hours. I did not watch it, but I heard about it the next morning when the calls started. Not from Emma, not from anyone in the family, from strangers, women mostly. Older women, mothers, daughters, people who saw something in that flicker of a video, something true. But at the venue, in real time, Emma was unraveling. She stomped back up the steps, grabbed the mic, still dead, and threw it down. The echo of plastic cracking against stone ricocheted through the silent courtyard. "This is sabotage!" she screamed. "She ruined everything!" Silence. She turned to the audience, face flushed, hands shaking. "That woman, she's nothing. She abandoned me. She's a leech, a ghost. She is not supposed to be here." Then, from the back of the courtyard, someone spoke softly. Maybe she had her reasons. Emma froze. "What did you say?" "I said," the woman repeated, louder this time, "maybe she had her reasons." A few others nodded, whispered. She looked devastated. She brought flowers. She wasn't even rude. Emma told her to leave. And just like that, the tide turned. For years I had been invisible. For years I had been erased, redacted, revised out of my daughter's narrative. But in that one, flickering hour of darkness, the truth broke through. They did not know my name, but they remembered me now. Emma screamed, "She destroyed my life," and someone replied, "Then maybe you should have invited her to it." The blackout became national news by the next morning. What began as a flickering video clip filmed from the third row turned into headlines across social media. Mother of the bride shuts down wedding she paid for. Wedding blackout. When the stage goes dark, so does the truth. And my personal favorite, who really paid for happily ever after? The hashtags exploded. Wedding blackout. Justice for mom, not just a decoration. Within 48 hours, I received interview requests from local news, morning radio shows, even podcast producers who wanted the exclusive mother's perspective. I ignored most of them. I was not looking for 15 minutes of fame. I had spent my entire life giving someone else the spotlight. But when Truth Behind the Lights called, a primetime talk show known for exposing family scandals with uncomfortable honesty, I said yes. I flew to Atlanta on a quiet Thursday. They booked me a hotel, sent a car. The producer asked if I wanted makeup. I said no. I wanted to look like myself, not the ghost my daughter tried to edit out. When I stepped onto the set, the audience was full. The host, a calm, kind woman in a navy suit, greeted me like I was someone who mattered. She introduced me as Mariana Rowan, the woman behind the most talked-about wedding in America. The segment began with a recap of the incident, the darkened wedding, the rising whispers, the clip that went viral. Then the host turned to me. "Mariana," she said, "you've stayed silent through most of this. Why speak now?" I took a breath, looked out at the crowd, at the cameras, at the lights that, for once, weren't aimed past me but directly at me. And I said, "They thought I was a decoration. They thought they could place me in the corner, if at all, forgotten, dusty, quiet. But they forgot one thing." I paused. "I built the stage." The room went still. "I paid for that day," I continued, "not just with money, with years, with labor, with every sacrifice a mother makes so her child can rise a little higher. I gave up vacations, health, comfort, sleep. I gave her everything I had, and the one thing I asked for? A seat. Not the spotlight, just a chair, a photo, a presence." I looked straight into the camera. When they kicked me out, they didn't just erase me from a wedding, they tried to erase me from her story. So yes, I pulled the plug. Not to ruin her day, but to remind her who made it possible. The host said nothing. Neither did the audience. But their faces, some with tears, others with tight jaws, said everything. After the segment aired, the fallout came swift and loud. The PR firm Emma worked for issued a formal statement citing ethical discrepancies in personal conduct affecting public representation. The brand deal she had secured with a skincare company was pulled. The influencer wedding photos never got posted. There were no working lights to photograph them by. Then came the biggest blow. The groom's family, embarrassed by the scandal, backed out of the legal marriage. They canceled the civil ceremony, citing irreconcilable family dynamics. Emma deleted her social media within the week, and I went home, poured myself a cup of tea, sat on my porch as the sun rose. I was not triumphant, I was not vindictive, I was simply whole. I never expected anyone to dig deeper. I thought the wave of attention would pass like all internet storms do, loud, fast, and forgettable. But this time, something lingered. Something caught fire. A local journalist, young, sharp-eyed, and unapologetically curious, reached out to me a week after the talk show aired. She said she was writing a follow-up story for her magazine. She said something about wanting to understand the whole picture. I didn't agree to an interview. I didn't need to. She found everything on her own. Emma, in her public bios, in corporate directories, even on LinkedIn, had listed her father as a small business entrepreneur and her mother as deceased since 2003. She'd told that story at fundraisers, brand conferences, and women's networking events for years, how she had overcome grief and poverty to rise on her own. The truth was less glamorous. Her father disappeared before she was born. I raised her alone, on diner wages and floor-mopped dreams, and I was still alive, as the world had now witnessed. Very much alive, very much breathing, very much bruised. The journalist ran the story with the headline, "Bride erased her mother's existence until the lights went out," and the world responded. A TikTok account with 1 million followers made a video titled, "The Mother They Tried to Delete." It showed split-screen footage, the darkened wedding on one side, and old photos of me holding Emma as a baby on the other. Me in my waitress uniform, me with curlers in my hair, me sewing Halloween costumes in the background of blurred childhood photos. They found it all. The community poured in. Strangers started posting their own stories, stitching their clips to mine. This was my mom, too. My mom went without everything for me to have something. We see you, Mariana. They started using a hashtag, Justice for Mom. It was not about revenge anymore. It was about recognition. I received letters in the mail from women across the country, handwritten, heartfelt. One woman in Vermont sent me a photo of her and her mother, standing in front of the trailer they'd shared for 20 years. Another from Oklahoma wrote, "Your story reminded me to call my mom. I hadn't spoken to her in 3 years. We cried together yesterday. Thank you." They did not know me, but they understood me, and that was more healing than any apology my daughter could ever offer. Emma remained silent. She did not make a statement, did not explain the falsehoods. She disappeared from the internet, from the firm, from the spotlight she had once chased like salvation. She had built her platform on fiction, and when the truth came back with lights off and cameras rolling, it swallowed the stage whole. I did not gloat. I did not speak her name, but the world had spoken mine, and for once, it echoed. I live in a small house now, nestled at the edge of a pine grove, where the trees sway like slow dancers, and the wind moves soft enough to hear yourself think. It is quiet out here, peaceful, the kind of quiet that feels earned. I grow tomatoes in clay pots, lettuce in raised beds, herbs along the windowsill. My hands, once dry from chemicals at the diner, are now stained with soil and rosemary. I write in a journal each morning, usually with tea by my side and a blanket on my lap, even when it's not cold, just because the weight reminds me I'm still here. No one calls me Mom anymore, but that word no longer hurts. Some days, I receive letters from people who saw the story. They say things like, "You remind me of my grandmother," or "Thank you for doing what so many of us wish we could." I do not answer every letter, but I read every one. My neighbors keep to themselves, mostly, but the little girl next door visits me sometimes. Her name is Lily. She's 9. Wide eyes, missing a front tooth, always asking questions. One afternoon she wandered into my garden while I was trimming the rosemary bush. "Miss Mariana," she said, holding out a flower she had picked, "I saw you on my mom's phone. You were famous." I smiled, just for a moment. She sat beside me, legs crossed, twirling the stem of her flower. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." She squinted at the sky. "Does everyone get to be in the picture?" "In what picture, sweetheart?" "Like, life like those big family photos? Do some people just not get in? I paused. The sunlight caught the edge of her cheek, glowing golden, and I said, "You do not have to be in the center of the picture, but no one has the right to erase you from it." She nodded slowly. "Okay." Then she ran off, her ponytail bouncing, flowers still in hand. That night, I wrote my final words in the journal I had started the day Emma's invitation arrived, unfinished, untethered, hopeful in all the wrong ways. I opened the last page. The pen felt heavier than usual, and I wrote, "I do not need applause, I do not need revenge, I only need to exist, not in someone's shadow, not in silence, but in the light, not crossed out, not switched off, not dragged out of the life I helped build, just here, as I am, present, whole, undeniable." I closed the book. The stars blinked above the trees. No spotlight, no wedding arch. But finally, after all this time, I felt like I belonged. A month after the dust settled, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Handwritten, just my name, Mariana, in a script I hadn't seen since Emma was 10. Inside was a letter, 4 short lines in her handwriting. I watched the interview. I didn't expect the world to turn against me. I guess I didn't know how much of you was in me. "I'm sorry for everything." There was no signature, no plea to call, no explanation, just the echo of a child who once clung to my apron strings, now whispering across miles of silence. I folded the letter and placed it in my journal. I didn't cry, not because I didn't want to, but because I had already mourned her once. I did not know if forgiveness would ever come. But I knew healing had already started, and that was enough. A week later, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I found an older woman on the porch, gray-haired, tall, holding a tray of biscuits. She introduced herself as May, a retired teacher from down the road. She said she saw the interview and hoped I wouldn't mind a neighbor bringing food just in case words weren't enough. That was the beginning. Soon after, a group of women from town reached out. Some widowed, some divorced, some simply tired. They asked if they could visit. "We're not looking for a retreat," one of them said. "We're just looking for somewhere we can breathe." So I opened my garden. I called it the picture frame. A place where no one needed to fight for the center. Just a space to stand, to speak, to belong. We met once a week, in lawn chairs and sun hats, sipping lemonade and telling stories we were never allowed to say aloud. One woman brought poetry. Another brought a painting of her younger self, left behind by a husband who said she'd let herself go. Every woman brought a piece of what she'd lost, and together we stitched something whole again. One afternoon, Lily, the little girl next door, asked if we could make a scrapbook. "Of the women," she said, "so no one forgets who they are." I found an old album, blank pages waiting. We filled it with photos, clippings, quotes in shaky cursive, snapshots of moments not posted online but lived fully. We named it the Uncropped Archive because we'd all been edited once. And now we were the editors. As the months passed, more letters arrived. Some from women who had once cut off their mothers, now reaching back. Others from daughters, realizing they had become the mothers they once judged. Every letter felt like a bridge, reaching from shame towards something softer. One letter stood out. It came from a young woman in Chicago. "Your story saved my mother. She was going to move out after I told her she embarrassed me, but then I saw your video, and I realized I was doing the same thing your daughter did. I told her she belongs in our wedding now. Front row. Thank you." I read it twice, then 3 times, and that night I sat under the stars and whispered a quiet prayer, not of victory, but of mercy, that maybe one story, however small, could bend the world a little closer to kindness. I still think of Emma sometimes, not with bitterness, but with that strange, aching love only mothers know. The kind that survives betrayal, silence, even rejection. The kind that says, "You do not need to come home for me to wish you warmth wherever you are." The porch light stays on, not because I expect her, but because I no longer hide in the dark. And if she ever comes back, I want her to see I am still standing. I am still in the frame. Thank you for walking this road with me. If this story stirred something in you, if you have ever felt invisible in a room you helped build, or silenced in a life you carried on your back, then you know this wasn't just about a wedding. It was about worth, about presence, about being remembered. They tried to write me out, but I picked up the pen and wrote myself back in, and I am not done. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, real, raw, unedited, then I invite you to subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Here we don't chase applause, we speak truth. We don't beg for seats, we reclaim them, and we remember what they hoped we'd forget. So click subscribe, join me next time, and until then, never let anyone tell you you don't belong in your own story.